Hey there. Tonight, let's slip into the hush before sunrise, where fog clings low and every stone feels alive with secrets. Picture a quarry at the world's edge, dawn bleeding silver shadows across ancient grooves, the air prickling with a cold that tastes of earth and memory. In this forgotten amphitheater, echoes of hammers linger on silent stone, waiting for new ears. Through that mist, an unimaginable shape emerges, not a finished marvel, but a massive, half-freed giant, its face rough as dragon hide, crouched close to the land. The ground trembles with its presence, hinting at stories buried deeper than any archaeologist's trowel could reach. Tonight, we'll trace those grooves and listen for what the world has nearly forgotten. Let yourself settle in, lights low, blankets pulled up, breath slowing with the rhythm of distant, invisible chisels. If this kind of ancient enigma stirs your curiosity, feel free to join our quiet corner of wonder. And as we gather here from far and wide, think of the thousands who stood in these ruins before us, wondering by torchlight just how these stones came to rest. Wherever you are, whatever the hour, we are explorers together tonight. Dawn creeps silently across the worn edge of a quarry. Faint, rhythmic grooves disappear under a veil of dew, hinting at hands long gone. In the hush, the air is tinged with mineral cold and dust, disturbed only by the imaginary ring of chisels against stone. Down the slope, the shadows stretch farther than they should, split by the massive bulk of a stone block, its unfinished face tracing the line between human ambition and nature's patience. This is the quiet stage of the ancient superstructures, where even the wind seems to pause in reverence. Here, heavy echoes linger, and the first light only sharpens their mystery. A waiting presence, unnamed and immense. The journey first leads to Yangshan, in the heartland not far from ancient Nanjing. Here the world grows impossibly silent beneath skeins of light, and 3 monstrous stone blocks lie still inside the skin of the earth. They look like sleeping behemoths stopped mid-dream. Each block is carved with purpose, but all remain stubbornly fused to the living bedrock underneath, frozen in a moment of abandoned ambition. Dust drifts in the slanted morning light, swirling above tool marks that have survived more centuries than names or banners. The air presses close, heavy with the effort of those who worked here, an effort that seems, through the measure of stone and time, to border on the supernatural. There is a strange intimacy to walking among giants that never woke, and the place feels sacred, precisely because of what was left unfinished. At first glance, the blocks seem mute, but the longer you linger, the more their details shout. Jagged ledges, half-carved steps, the faintest outlines of an imperial dream, all cast upward, as if competing with the sky. But nothing moves. The largest of them stretches longer than a city bus, wider than a trefoil avenue, but it too remains stubbornly embedded in the ancient stone below. How many hands broke here? How many plans collapsed when stone outweighed the wildest hopes? No inscription tells the moment the workforce gave up, or how many lives bent and slipped in the sudden certainty that some dreams cannot be moved, not even by an emperor. The details catch at the mind. Notice the pattern of cut marks, neat as if measured by stars. Tools chipped through the night, men sweating by firelight, each stroke unleashing fragments of darkness that drifted across the land. Still, the blocks did not yield. The grand project that once animated this mountainside flared, faltered, then left behind a question heavier than any boulder. Why begin what you cannot possibly finish? Even now, the answer drifts just out of reach. That haunting silence at Yangshan sets the tone for our journey, a reminder that, sometimes, the biggest secrets are written in what remains untouched. As dawn advances, watch how the stone's skin changes color, gray turning gold, gold to a ghostly white, edges sharpening in cool brilliance. Lichen collects in the cracks, softening the lines, but never quite hiding them. Dew pearls atop chisel scars, as if the earth itself is weeping for the ambition spent here. Wind sighs along fractured facets, carrying a faint mineral tang mixed with the memory of old sweat and smoke. In that air, time compresses, a hammer blow from the Ming, a whispered curse, an unfinished monument that refuses to fade. But the world of immense stones does not end with Yangshan. Slip east and south, the morning coolness thickens as the journey reaches deeper below. Where once the work paused above ground, another tradition dug down, away from the gaze of empires. In central Anatolia's high, rocky steppe, long tunnels dip into shadow, whispering of whole cities built in negative space, carving homes and halls where bedrock itself was the medium. Instead of monuments left for the ages, these spaces swallowed generations, each chamber echoing the footsteps of people who turned necessity into an art of survival. Derinkuyu, under the shifting soils of Turkey, was both fortress and refuge. Unlike the abandoned surface titans of Yangshan, these chambers are finished and used, shaped for living and hiding. Under the candleless dark, countless rooms nestle in the earth, winding downward in corkscrew turns. The air stays cool, always the same, a perfect cradle for food and wine, which could rest undisturbed for seasons upon seasons in that gentle embrace. People here had to plan with a patience to match the stone. Grain was stored in silent bins, wine sealed from rot, and thick doors rolled into sockets designed to resist the most desperate invaders. Silent corridors carried both secrets and waste, each nook laid out with care for comfort and order, a triumph of invisible engineering and quiet foresight. Above, Anatolian sun baked the plains and winds scoured the hills. Below, a world endured in hushed voices and soft footfalls. When the outside burned or enemies came, families vanished into their own underworld. The space felt close, each carved ceiling stained with lamp smoke, each alley echoing with child's laughter and the grind of stored grain. Even today, the hum of summer insects dies at the entrance, replaced by a cool mineral stillness that draws you into the past. Here the mysteries mount, but the stakes feel deeply human. On the surface, monuments begun but never finished, testaments to the impossible scale of forgotten dreams. Beneath, entire populations sculpted hope out of stone, betting their survival on architectural ghosts that defy explanation even after centuries. Everywhere, the work hums with a double echo. First, of ambition that toppled under its own weight. Then, of determination that hollowed out safety under the boots of the world. Each twist of the journey throws new light on what ancient hands could attempt, and what the mind still cannot quite decipher. But beneath awe lies a thorn of unease. The more stone you see, whether sky-piercing or hidden, the stranger it feels to realize how little anyone truly knows. What called these unknown engineers to push against the limits of flesh and rock? Why choose impossibility, risking everything for permanence or safety that still feels unfinished, even today? Outside day rises, but the stones remain, unmoved, unhurried, half-speaking. As the journey winds on, the largest block at Yangshan calls from the unfinished edge of dawn, begging for a final answer. Somewhere further along the quarry path, the stone dominates its world, raw, chiseled, impossible, its silence daring us to imagine what comes next. The stone dominates its world, raw, chiseled, impossible. It looms where mist snakes through the early morning air, and the first touch of sunlight stretch across the moss-crawled surfaces. Here, in the shadowed gut of the Yangshan quarry, everything is silent, except for the distant caw of crows and the slick drop of water trickling into unseen crevices. The monolith does not sit so much as repose, a giant reclining, half born from the mountainside, waiting for a task that would never come. Walk closer. The sheer face rises ahead in rough, almost geometric lines, scarred by ancient hand tools. Each groove runs deep, wide enough that the tip of a finger easily loses itself in their cold depths. Shafts of light filter down, and for just a moment, the dust frozen in these beams glimmers like motes of memory. The exposed side of the block bears the touch of thousands, laborers and stonemasons, their breath swallowed by the mountain long before the quarry fell silent. Now, only your own footfalls disturb the blanket of centuries that covers this place. The mind tries to grasp the reality. This stone weighs some 16,000 tons, a mass so massive that even today our most powerful cranes would strain, their steel cables singing, their engines protesting, and likely would still fall short. In recorded history, there is nothing quite like it. The block could swallow entire buildings. To try and move it without modern machinery is to imagine a world where human desire and ingenuity reach up to touch the impossible. Over 6 centuries have passed since men first scarred this quarry in the name of an emperor, and over 6 centuries have passed since the monolith sank into stillness, unfinished, awaiting purpose. The very permanence of its failure marks it as a riddle, an open wound in the mountain that never healed. At the far edge of this mass, where the older lichen traces shadowed patterns, the stone drops away into a pit, where laborers once chipped tirelessly, their tools making a staccato symphony that echoed so far it was said to rattle the teeth of the overseers on the ridge. Some claimed the work was ordained by the Yongle emperor, whose reign in the early 15th century was marked by grand ambition and restlessness. Each slice and chip was an offering to dreams of grandeur, carved in an age when a throne could command the mountain itself. But the monolith never moved. Why attempt what was clearly impossible by any known means? Down here, inches from the stone grains, the ambitions of emperors feel as insubstantial as fog. The mountain keeps its silence on how, or even if, they plan to shift this uncanny weight. But the puzzle endures, a testimony to both the boldness and the hubris of those who thought the mountain might obey. A gust stirs dust into your lungs. You step back, blinking, and lose yourself for a moment in the immensity of it. The quarry floor tells its own tale. Here, a runnel filled with rain, and there, a tangle of ancient tool shards winking up from the packed earth. The sunlight grows stronger, painting the monolith in gold and shadow. The textures, up close, are both crude and faintly delicate, a work started in fevered haste, never finished, forever abandoned. Then, a pattern interrupt in the minds of modern engineers. The question is not how this block could have been moved, but what drove its makers to dream so recklessly large. Here, scale itself becomes a kind of enigma. The block's proportions are so monumental that its mere existence warps ideas of what ancient labor could achieve. Even with 1,000 hands, ropes thicker than a man's arm, and all the levers a mind could devise, no theory quite explains the logistics. The air feels heavier, as though weighted by this unlifted burden, and the long shadow it casts on history's imagination. Time itself seems to coil around the stones. In this quarry, 600 years can pass in the blinking of an eye. You can almost hear the faint ring of chisels, echoing from a world that vanished before Da Vinci ever picked up a brush, or Columbus saw the western sea. The monolith, half freed, remains as it was, its assignment to posterity, to those who would wonder forever why it was never taken, never given the chance to live as more than promise. Beyond the Yangshan site, the winds of curiosity shift elsewhere. Across the mountains and far beyond, other mysteries wait in stone. Deep in Anatolia, another riddle sprawls underground. The colossal city of Derinkuyu, an inverted hive stretching across so many levels that no torch, no shaft of sunlight can touch its deepest rooms. The echoes of steps long faded need not always be above the earth. Sometimes, humanity's strangest ambitions dig downward. Here, though, in the stone-ridden heart of Yangshan, the monolith remains queen, outlasting both the ambitions that awoke it and the doubts that have surrounded it ever since. Somewhere at the intersection of sweat and vision, this impossible block, born of command, abandoned by circumstance, reminds us of just how little separates certainty from myth. Will anyone ever know the true cost, or the original hope that rested on its back? At the edge of the Yangshan quarry, men once gathered under banners meant for an emperor. Grey dawn settles over Jiangsu province as a thin mist threads itself around the jagged rim of the Yangshan quarry. From above, the carved terraces of ancient ambition ripple across the hillside, each chisel stroke still visible if you get close enough to the stone. Centuries ago, a gathering of men, laborers, overseers, visionaries gripping imperial scrolls, stood beneath fluttering banners, their shadows long against the rising sun. The air would have trembled with the clang of metal on rock, and the sharp, rhythmic calls echoing across the quarry face. Today, those echoes have faded, replaced by the soft sigh of wind, carrying dust over broken steps and unfinished cuts. At the far edge, the monoliths lie exposed and silent. They are immense. One alone stretches nearly as long as a train car, rough on some sides and astonishingly smooth on others, as if someone meant to coax a monument from living mountain. The largest block, still soldered to its bed, towers above a field of smaller, discarded stones. Its upper face is squared, geometric, so sharply defined that a fingertip run along the line picks up stone dust, but finds not a hint of crumbling age. The block's footprint dwarfs any visitor who draws near. Flanking it, two other behemoth slabs sprawl, all angular mass and potential. Each of these giants weighs thousands of tons, so heavy that their purpose and fate have become an enduring riddle. The original plan, as the stones record in their unfinished state, was to create something that defied the imagination, a monument upright and imposing, meant to serve as a stele for the mausoleum of the Yongle Emperor. But here, on this raw canvas of stone and silence, something shifted. Ambition collided with reality, and the grand design faltered. Work stopped abruptly. Snow collects in the gouges where chisels once labored. No one completed the separation of the blocks from their quarry cradles. The hillside stands motionless, but the sense of halted momentum lingers in the air. In the quiet hours before sunrise, the quarry presents a tableau that aches with questions. Why did they choose this mountain, this particular seam of rock, to yield the bones of a monument? What calculations, what desperate resolve, must have filled the minds of those who first traced the outline of these stones? The surface of the site sharpens the paradox. Along one face, the raw rock juts and crumbles in earthy chaos, while just a handspan away, the stone lies tamed, planed perfectly flat, lines clean as a blade's edge, dark veins of mineral glimmering in slanted light. Step sideways, and bird call briefly strikes the silence before fading into the weight of shadows beneath these abandoned forms. For a moment, stand right at the severed edge of that largest block. The air is cold here, stone radiating the memory of ancient hands. Drop a pebble on this surface, and its hollow clatter vanishes quickly, swallowed by a hush that once held the roars of organized labor. One can almost sense the orchestrated chaos from generations past, runners shuttling messages between foremen, oxen snorting nervously as carts piled high with earth rumbled to and fro. But against this spectacle there is only stillness now, an absence of human presence, somehow even louder than 1,000 voices could have been. What stopped them? The official histories are thin at best. No account names the moment a foreman laid down his mallet, or when the banners were folded for the last time. Some say the calculations simply failed. The mass of these blocks so far exceeded the reach of levers and ropes that the enterprise was doomed from the start. Others whisper of imperial decree, or disaster unexpected, or even of omens scribed in the rock's intractable heart. All we have are the scars, drill marks trailing like signatures, wedges jammed and left to rust, abandoned tools buried beneath fallen dust. In daylight, shafts of brightness slash across step-cut ledges and cast dramatic shadows into veins and crevices. The geometry is mesmerizing. Walk a few paces, and the lichen-softened ramparts give way to abrupt right angles. Overhead, a hawk circles, its cry briefly startling the calm. The human mind strains to calculate weight and possibility, to slice a block like this from the living mountain and move it. Even a stride seems unthinkable, yet the intention rests in every carved groove. At such massive scale, ancient technology faces its most humbling test. Now, let the focus shift, abrupt as a gasp of mountain wind, to a world beneath the Anatolian surface thousands of miles away. Beneath the crust of Cappadocia, the land reveals another, entirely different stone mystery. In this region, for generations, people have dug into soft, volcanic tuff to create homes and storerooms, honeycombing the hillsides with shelter against the whims of weather and war. Elsewhere, in places like Derinkuyu, stables are carved deep into upper galleries, cleverly ventilated shafts providing air for both animals and humans, far beneath the eyes of any invader. The chisel's work here, like in the Chinese quarry, turns living rock into places of purpose and refuge. Yet back in China, with the quarry open to wind and starlight, the earth's memory is all unfinished business. The monoliths refuse to yield their full story. Who first called for such scale? How many watched, day after day, as the lines of ambition drew deeper? Some answers are lost, sedimented beneath centuries of rain and root, but other traces linger, visible every time the sun rakes across the scarred ledges. The stark edges and unfinished chasms hold the questions that no wind can carry away. Here, scale is both a marvel and a warning. The sweep of the Yangshan quarry, its contrast of fierce precision and raw upheaval, dares later generations to define where aspiration ends and hubris begins. The cuttings in these hillsides do more than baffle. They force us to witness the edge of human capability, and to imagine, for just a moment, the thundering commotion of workers whose vision outpaced even emperor's decree. No scrolls or etched slates reveal how these monoliths were meant to move from mountain to mausoleum. In the blue haze of dawn, mist hovers over the lowlands beyond Nanjing. The world is still, yet there in the broken hills, a presence lingers, a megalithic puzzle that refuses to yield its answers. Amidst tangled roots and wind-scarred stone lies the Yangshan quarry, its silence resting heavy on the air, save for the whisper of shifting dust. Here, the ambitions of emperors and the raw muscle of thousands once converged, chiseling the impossible with simple iron and fierce will. The echoes of ancient labor are hushed now, but the ghosts of effort remain. Stone faces rise from the earth, unfinished and frozen in time, some as tall as houses, and one, a colossal steely base, stretching longer than a city bus. Its true weight almost defies belief. No scrolls or etched slates reveal how these monoliths were meant to move from mountain to mausoleum. The puzzle is complete in its silence. Thousands of workers, timber sleds, and engineering lost to obscurity. To transport giants of this magnitude across Earth's uncertain surface and up to the site of the Emperor's Rest would demand actions that remain unwritten. The result is an archeological mystery, colossal fragments tethered forever to their origin, marking the limits of knowledge with their unmoved presence. The air at Yangshan is cool, scented with the faint metallic tang left by rain on bare rock. Grass bends along the scars where tools once bit into the living stone, traces of ancient hands etched in every channel. When the sun first crests over the ridge, faint golden shafts catch the rough geometry of a block, thousands of tons too heavy for any modern crane. One boulder alone, never freed from its cradle, looms at over 16,000 tons. For a moment, imagine the riot of sound and purpose here centuries ago, the scrape of sledges, the groan of timber planks, workers' shouts dissolved in the churn of ambition. Teams, sometimes hundreds per shift, may have strung ropes as thick as arms around the massive stone bodies, inching them forward with a concerted rhythm. Yet, even with unending labor, the stones never moved from this mountainside. Not a single record survived to tell of the methods considered, abandoned, or attempted. It is a monument not only to aspiration, but to the limits that flesh and wood can endure. Archaeologists calculate that even today, moving a block of this size would test the bounds of heavy industry. But here in ancient China, all that stood between the emperor's tomb and the impossibly heavy stones were people, ropes, and the rough ingenuity of their age. The plan, it seems, outpaced every resource at their command. Worn steps lead up to the most forlorn of the monoliths. Moss grows thick in the seams where water pools, and fine grains of sand drift into their shadowed halls. Each gouge in the rock face tells its own silent story. Broken chisels, splintered handles, ambitions blunted by the sheer mass of matter. A modern visitor can almost feel the strain hanging in the air, an unresolved tension between what was imagined and what proved physically feasible. Some theorize that calculations about moving these stones may have only come after the first cuts had been made, as if the initial fervor was replaced, all too late, by the crushing realization of the task's scale. Step by step, the project seems to have ground to a halt, ambition stilled by the silent logic of the earth. Yet, even if the stones could have been dragged from their mountain origin, an even greater dilemma awaited, raising them, with nothing but wood, rope, and muscle, to the heights of the emperor's tomb precinct. The human chain that might have attempted it vanishes into speculation. No winches or frameworks remain, only the scarred bedrock and the rumor of impossibility linger. The ruins here stand as a mute rebuke to all easy assumptions about ancient engineering. There is a humility enforced by sheer scale, a lesson writ in silent, unyielding stone. At a certain point, the arena of human effort met the unwavering resistance of geology, and the people here were forced to concede ground to the land itself. But the atmosphere of mystery thickens as you travel farther beyond Yangshan and into the underground labyrinths coursing beneath the Anatolian earth. As the light fades and footsteps echo through twisting passageways, the setting breathes a different enigma. Was every civilization confronted by monuments impossible to move? Or did some find a way to slip beneath the earth altogether? The stakes, measured in granite and silence, linger long after the last chisel stroke fades. It is not only the riddle of movement or ambition, but the question of memory. What drove these ancient builders, and at what moment did knowledge slip, leaving only these vast clues tangled in stone? The quarry's colossal relics remain embedded in their birthrock, a scar in the countryside that silently challenges every ledger of ancient ability. Somewhere beneath the Turkish home now, generations later and worlds away, a cracked stone wall yields to a workman's hand, opening into cool shadow and a passage steeped in the unknown. A single chisel, striking stone, echoes across time. It is dusk in Cappadocia when the old wall surrenders in a slow, reluctant crumble, the last rays of sun angling through a Turkish window to catch the trembling hands of a man kneeling in his basement. Dust, a veil centuries thick, billows into the beam of his flashlight as he leans into the hollow, heart pounding, each exhale stirring ancient motes awake. His breath hangs in the cold, enveloped by the sudden hush that follows the breaking of earth. There is a gap wide enough for a man to slip through, opening not to the neat rootwork of a storeroom or a pocket of forgotten masonry, but a new passage, shaped by a patient, unknown hand. He can just make out the brush of tool marks along the tunnel's arch, the ceiling curving above him into shadow, lowering itself with a practiced calm that carries the weight of generations lost. His pulse races, a beat in step with something ancient, yet the silence here feels practiced, like the place remembers him from long before. A moment's courage pushes him forward, and he crawls into the cool throat of stone. The floor dips, the air thickens, and, suddenly, the walls breathe out a faint coolness, the scent as old as the mountain itself. His flashlight flickers across rough-cut walls, revealing a chamber just big enough to stand in, its surfaces glinting in sliding arcs of pale light. A scatter of stone debris at his feet crunches like brittle bones. He stands absolutely still, listening. The ceiling sits low, forcing a respectful bow, and he is struck by the sense that he is not the first to stand here, nor will he be the last. Down the hall, a shadow waits, shaped like another opening, a deliberate invitation deeper. He calls for his family, for neighbors, and together they peel back plaster and rubble, uncovering more tunnels, leading not to endings but to beginnings. As the weeks unfold, a small town's curiosity becomes incredulity, and then awe. Walls traced in chalk dust give way to spiraling steps, sometimes two at a time, descending into darkness. Where a basement once meant bread and storage, now a labyrinth sprawls beneath the feet of the living, far outpacing the narrow streets above. With every clatter of shovels, secrets bowed in volcanic stone are coaxed from centuries of sleep. This is how Derinkuyu is reborn, not by decree or design, but by accident, an entire city sunken into the pliant tuff beneath Anatolian soil, revealed first by a workman's determination, and then by the relentless curiosity that comes with discovery. Dust still hovers stubbornly in the silent air as explorers descend, their footsteps muffled on a staircase worn smooth by ancestors. The walls seem to pulse under the touch of soft lamplight. Down, level by level, the city teases its depths, each floor surrendering new wonders, communal halls where hundreds could gather shoulder to shoulder, intimate alcoves tucked away with surprising warmth, long corridors carved with uncanny precision. In one chamber, a cylinder of stone imposes itself across the entrance. A wheeled door, massive and geometric, capable of sealing off entire galleries with the shove of a dozen determined bodies. Moving in silence, the explorers twist and double back through a maze of rooms and passageways. The echoes return in every step. Cooking smoke once curled skyward through discreet chimneys, now choked by silence. The remnants of old ovens, communal wells, even wine presses hint at fragile moments of laughter, fear, celebration, and mourning. The city hums with memory, a sort of symphony played in minor chords, composed for listening ears and careful footprints. It is far more than a hideaway. It is a civilization hidden in stone, its planners as methodical as any imperial architect, though their names were never carved in record. But something within Derinkuyu refuses clear explanation. The scale is almost playful in its defiance. Stories circle the site, whispered among archaeologists and guides alike, of hundreds of interconnected rooms, stables for cattle, chapels, and vast reservoirs. There are air shafts, so perfectly spaced that even the lowest gallery, nearly 60 meters deep, remains breezy and cool. The faintest movement of air carrying whispers of volcanic dust. Kneeling in the echoing dark, a modern visitor cannot help but imagine the generations who must have carried soil, shaped every niche, and lived seasons in the underworld. Here, the line between safety and confinement blurs. There are hints in the architecture, stone that rolls to barricade, dead ends that spiral back upon themselves, wells that pierce through floors in a spiral. What was the city built to withstand? Was it designed as a sanctuary from invading armies, a retreat from the caprice of climate, or a sanctuary for ancient faiths? The answer is smudged, carried away by centuries of dust and silence. The architect's reasons sealed as firmly as the stone doors they left behind. A pattern interrupt, a jolt, half a world away. Another enigma stirs beneath the branches of cypress trees and the misted hush of Nanjing. The Ming Shaoling mausoleum sprawls, stately and severe, along the slopes of Purple Mountain. Here, in the early 1400s, workmen, hardy and faceless as those in Cappadocia, wrestled with ambition on a scale no less daunting. Their tools ground against stone, under the sharp discipline of the Yongle Emperor's command. Return now to a quarry, buried in moss and silence, where the unfinished monument looms. Stone blocks hewn and abandoned rest at awkward angles, a testament to a vision interrupted. It is said the blocks were destined for the emperor's own mausoleum, meant to form a stele unlike any the world had ever seen. The sweep of a hand across their rough flank conjures the ghostly grit of calloused fingers and the ringing ache of bamboo mallet on stone. How many hands did it take to dream this structure into being, and how many more to walk away, leaving the task frozen in time? In Derinkuyu, voices that once bounced off rock are long gone, but the city's skeleton remains cool and unyielding, the weight of its upper worlds defied by the ingenuity below. Deep inside, sunlight dwindles to a narrow thread, a golden blade pressing up against the absolute dark. Just past the threshold of the lowest chamber, the visitor's own heartbeat seems to find rhythm with the city's pulse, each thump a reminder of the souls who dug downward instead of outward, who hid their lives beneath a landscape that gave nothing easily. The paradox endures. Is it desperation or genius that drives a culture to build where only shadow and silence live? None who walk these halls today can fully know. The rock keeps its secrets. As the last echo fades and the air grows thin, every unanswered question lingers, unsettling, magnetic, as the earth itself seems to hold its breath. Inside Derinkuyu, the world contracts and expands again, each echo promising something stranger ahead. A hush settles beneath Cappadocia, as feet descend the stone throat of Derinkuyu, swallowed by the earth in a spiral of flickering lamplight. Voices fade, overtaken by the muted percussion of footsteps on carved tufa. Each curve of the tunnel, each grain of dust floating in a cold shaft of light, hints at ancient secrets pressed deep below the surface. Here, more than 60 meters beneath open sky, nearly 200 feet down, a labyrinth sprawls into darkness, beguiling the eye with its impossible expanse and uncanny order. The walls close in, rough and cool, bearing the imprint of tool marks and the sweat of hands long vanished. The air is tinged with a mineral chill, each breath humming with silence and distant echoes, as if the stone itself remembers. Underfoot, the passageway narrows and then widens, looping back on itself only to plunge again. Lanterns cast skewed shadows, revealing steep staircases cut sharp into the bedrock, venturing ever downward, a dizzying sequence of ascents and descents connecting levels upon levels of the city. Derinkuyu is not a mere shelter. It is an underworld metropolis, incomparably more complex than the modest caves and hideaways found elsewhere in this rocky landscape, where most ancient refuges offered a single chamber or two, perhaps a hidden niche behind a discreet door. This place radiates outward and downward, an intricate maze cut for a purpose lost to time. On the first level, a visitor might stumble into what was once a bustling entry hall. Low ceilings force even the tall to bow. Faint lines in the dust trace communal spaces, a rough-hewn stone bench along the wall, dark alcoves where food was once stored away. Air shifts through cunningly carved ventilation shafts, whispering through the network below. Further in, niches carved into the sides suggest places of worship or secret congregation. The stone walls bearing witness to rituals now drowned in centuries of silence. The deeper the explorer ventures, the more the city unfolds its secrets. Second, third, even eighth levels reveal themselves, dormitories where hundreds could have slept, shoulder to shoulder to shoulder, kitchens where stone mortars once ground the grains of forgotten harvests, circular doors, some weighing hundreds of pounds, rest off their hinges, colossal millstones once rolled to seal off passageways and defend against intrusion, now fixed in quiet eternity. Each space carries a latent sense of purpose, haunting in its specificity, as if life could reappear at the shift of a shadow. A twist comes suddenly in this descent. Not all is stone and silence. At one crooked corner, the carved passage narrows so dramatically that a grown person must pass sideways, shoulders brushing both walls. Shouts would not carry far here. The darkness amplifies each heartbeat, each scrape of leather sole on stone. Then, abruptly, the space opens to an unexpected gallery, a cavernous chamber large enough to host gatherings, its ceiling arched and veined with black mineral lines. Stray beams from portable lamps glint off subtle color, faint ochre and charcoal, the ghostly remains of a mural or ceremonial marking. This is no mere corridor. It seems a hall of decision or sanctuary, set apart, bearing the weight of memory. Why did generations of hands tunnel ever deeper, carving a multi-level settlement vast enough to shield thousands? Did they hide from invaders, from a climate collapse, or something far stranger? The evidence is silent, yet insistent. Every dead end reveals an escape shaft. Every communal hall backs onto a concealed passage. The layout suggests a people obsessively planning for both continuity and survival. If the world above turned hostile, life below could carry on. Near the deeper levels, the temperature drops further. Breath billows in faint white puffs. Water wells up in small cisterns, born of subterranean streams guided into grooved channels. Here, storage rooms are wrapped in cold, preserving root vegetables and grains through entire seasons of absence. A makeshift stable appears, its floor scraped smooth and pitted, still redolent of animal earthiness. The labyrinth extends into niches and antechambers for every conceivable need, each more astonishing than the last. Another twist interrupts the tunnel story. In one deeply shadowed recess is a narrow shaft that stretches vertical beyond eyesight, its surface scored by regular grooves. Some scholars believe this was an escape vent, meant to send children and messages up to the surface in times of peril. Others say it doubled as a conduit for air and water, a literal artery connecting the city below with the living world above. Standing in the low light, surrounded by inscrutable carvings and half-finished passages, it is impossible to ignore the sheer scale of human effort invested here. Imagine the echo of chisels and hammers, the gentle conversations of masons and families reaching through darkness, working not for months or years, but for centuries. Each generation adding new loops to the underground warren. The realization strikes, sharp as a chisel's edge. This is only one thread from a wider tapestry of ancient ambition. Thousands of kilometers away, in the heart of China, another wonder was underway. In the early years of the 15th century, the Yangshan quarry would yield monolithic stones meant for the Ming Shaoling mausoleum, each block so immense that modern machines would strain to lift them. In both cases, the question lingers. What could drive an entire culture to attempt the impossible? To move earth and stone on scales almost incomprehensible? What lost knowledge, or fear, or dream shaped their every decision? Hundreds of feet below the surface or amidst the mountains of Jiangsu. Inside Dilinkuyu, the torch throws shifting patterns along the walls. Dust motes swirl in the stale air, catching the light where it falls through a narrow ventilation shaft overhead. No voices call out, no footsteps echo beyond your own. The city waits, its secrets sealed beneath the weight of volcanic rock, stubborn against both conquest and memory. One final corridor leads to a sealed door, round, monumental, barring access to chambers still hidden beyond current maps. Evidence of tools rests in the stray chips of stone at its base, as if abandoned only yesterday. The enormity of what's left unexplored presses in from every side. The ancient city is silent now, yet heavy with anticipation. Somewhere in the darkness, another tunnel veers away from the known path, descending into blackness as life below. Ground demanded ingenuity matching the demands of the surface world. Down in the cold hush of Derinkuyu, every breath is a measured gift. Beneath the crust of Anatolia, the living world contracts into stone corridors rough with the scars of longing and necessity. There, the air itself feels ancient, edged with the mineral tang of volcanic tuff and the chill that lingers long after sunrise sweeps across the plains above. Dust drifts, soft and spectral, catching in thin rays of lantern light as it settles on walls scored by generations of hands and hope. At first, the stone underfoot vibrates quietly with sound, soft heels, hurried conversations, and deeper still, the music of moving air. The true miracle here, hidden in silence, is how these people survived, not by strength alone, but by mastering the invisible. More than 50 shafts, cut with impossible precision, vein the bedrock like the arteries of a patient innovation. They draw whispers of cool air down and through, swirling gently past the bellies of oxen and the drowsing hush of children pressed close to mothers. The labyrinth breathes, stubbornly efficient. Light, where it appears at all, is always in motion. Oil lamps flicker against soot-blackened ceilings, casting trembling shadows across archways broad enough to swallow a pair of oxen. The rock swallows the lamp's warmth, leaving only a faint glow as it braves the endless dark. On occasion, between the low thunder of so many hiding lives, a lamp pops softly, a reminder of the ever-present risk that smoke without escape could choke all endurance. Above, redolent with the scent of old oil and char, ventilation shafts yawn wide, lifelines for every soul, every stolen hour under siege. Roaming the warren, each chamber reveals a piece of a vanished world. In the sprawling communal halls, echoes ripple, once the laughter of children, now the hush of memory. Here, space for thousands, their numbers unfathomably large, gathered like flocks in the time of fear. Smaller rooms branch off, narrow mouths leading into private alcoves and clustered spaces. Some are stacked with ancient storage bins, the corners worn smooth by baskets of grain and barrels of wine. Others still hold the memory of animals, hoof scrapes, dusty indentations where sheep once slept, their presence as essential as the bread and silence. Yet Derinkuyu is not merely a gallery of survival. It is a feat of calm, methodical design. Every groove, every niche, serves an unspoken function. Grain troughs are carved flush with walls to maximize lean space. In shadowed corners, massive stone discs lean against their notches, doors thick enough to stop a charging enemy, rolling quietly on command, sealing corridors like the world's most ancient submarines. A sharp drift of wind whistles through a lonely shaft, stirring a new suspicion. Above ground, storms can be seen and heard, but below, danger is soundless and slow. For every bottleneck passage, there is a mechanism. For every refuge, a system, invisible yet vital. Waste channels cut discreetly through the depths, carrying used water, and refuse away from the huddled living spaces so that disease would not flourish. Some shafts, sunk deeper still, reach cool pockets of groundwater, doubling as wells to slake thirst, their walls slick with centuries of touch. The art of underground living is not merely carving rock, but engineering entire cycles of life into the bedrock itself. Pause for a moment in one of the darkest intersections. Here, the air feels thicker, thrumming softly with the imprint of thousands who paused, huddled in half-lit patience through hours of siege. Even despite careful planning, the dome overhead carries black scorches where oil lamp smoke once gathered. Generations must have traced these passages by the meager light of flame, lungs burning, wondering if the stone would hold, if hope could outlast the hunger and fear. Every so often, a corridor reveals markings strange and almost modern. Deep chisel lines, elaborate pecked patterns lost to translation. Did these serve as guides or warnings? The meaning is gone, but the sense of purpose lingers. The deeper one steps, the more the stone's ancient coolness becomes a shroud, giving way only to the rush of air and the unsteady rhythm of one's own heart. Survival here is communal, yet it is also the sum of 1,000 tiny acts, a mother's careful rationing, the shepherd's patience, the artisan's measured cuts. Just as the mind begins to settle into underground routine, the path lurches again, a twist in stone, a new puzzle. Was Derinkuyu always a solitary marvel? Or did its builders dream of connection? The discovery of low winding tunnels snaking out from one complex to another hints at an immense network, a web silently threaded beneath the Cappadocian plains. Some say these passageways allowed for entire populations to slip unseen from one honeycomb of survival to another, linked by the darkness and the pulse of shifting air. Imagine, then, a city whose boundaries dissolve, not into streets or plazas, but into river-like tunnels flowing from one stronghold to the next. What histories were passed hand to hand through these veins of darkness? What secrets lie sealed behind walls, not yet collapsed, behind circular doors unmoved for 1,000 years? Yet the most astonishing mystery in these depths is not just about scale. It is about memory. For all its order, all its patient design, Derinkuyu shelters answers just beyond reach. Who first struck stone here, and why did so many follow? What calamities drove them into the underworld, and who returned to tell their stories? The sensations cling, the dry brush of dust against skin, the echo of invisible currents weaving through passageways, the quiet heartbeat of stone itself. Elsewhere, in another land under the rule of the Yongle Emperor, earthbound ingenuity was expressed in monuments rising toward the sky rather than diving into it. But in Derinkuyu, survival demanded a kindness from stone, a design so complete that breathing, hiding, eating, and even worship became communal acts, bound by tradition and the promise that darkness could outwait any storm. Long after the lamps are extinguished and the corridors empty, the questions remain, drifting like the faintest breeze through a forgotten shaft. From chamber to shaft to, well, the maze of Derinkuyu offers no final blueprint, just the hum of endurance echoing through stone, the sense that time itself, locked away in dust and soot, is still searching for a way out. At first, it seems the stone is holding its breath. Derinkuyu, in the dead heart of Cappadocia, keeps its stories sealed beneath the baked Anatolian earth. Here, at the threshold, a narrow staircase spiraling, darkness blooming like ink ahead. Dust trembles under boots, the stale air flavored with a memory of soot and age. Each step descends not only through solid volcanic tuff, but also along a twisting corridor of questions. Who first dared the bite of chisel against this stone, so far beneath surface sunlight? Who first traded earth for safety, hundreds of feet below? Beneath the surface, where sunlight reaches only as a fleeting shimmer in dust motes, the marks of ancient labor echo in chiseled walls and soot-shaded ceilings. Dust settles slowly, veiling faint handprints lost to centuries, but the weight of the rock never lifts. There's a hush that feels intentional here, an enforced silence that resists time itself. The air thickens, more still, as if every breath must first earn the right to disturb memories embedded in volcanic grain. Shallow grooves run the length of passages, paralleling where ropes may have dragged or feet shuffled generations ago. Overhead, the stumps of tallow lamps, charred black, cling stubbornly to the past, their smoke stains tracing desperate movement through winding tunnels. The only other sound is the faint, distant drip of water filtering through the roots of mountains above. It is tempting to imagine these first rooms shaped by people driven by a need deeper than shelter, perhaps by a whispered terror that stalked the open fields. All that endures to mark these efforts are the scars in stone and a scatter of broken bone pressed into the silt. The Phrygians are sometimes credited here, within the 8th or 7th century before the Common Era, though the stones themselves withhold their true allegiance. No inscription betrays the hand that drew the first plans. Further into the tunnel's belly, chambers branch like the capillaries of some petrified beast. These spaces breathe the residue of both function and faith, a rock-cut stable, a carved-out schoolroom, burials and kitchens. Striations climb the walls in uneven lines, a silent record of implements biting through layer after layer. Yet even the most disciplined historian finds no signature among the veins, only rumor and conjecture. The Hittites, their empire a memory thousands of years older, become ghosts in the retelling, their presence suggested more by silence than evidence. The possibility that these rooms echo the ambitions of so many different hands adds unease. Derinkyū may have been both a sanctuary and a tomb, and its timeline is a jigsaw without corners. Here a pivot comes, a sudden cool gust from nowhere, a shaft, impossible to see until the light is angled just right, draws air from dizzying heights above. Carefully, the camera follows as a trail of dust lifts toward a cylindrical void hacked through solid stone. It is a marvel of ancient engineering, a vertical artery nearly 60 meters in descent, serving both as a lifeline and a puzzle. This is not the work of a people content with the surface. The ingenuity is clear, but the intention behind it flickers in the half-light. Twisting deeper, the visitor emerges into a communal hall, its rough pillars hunching protectively over the room. Shadows coil at the margins where long dead sentinels once may have lingered. Here, lamp smoke would have pooled and eddied, threatening to suffocate, unless, that is, someone had considered this challenge. Cut into the rock are vertical vents, clever as lungs, engineered with almost surgical precision. Smoke once snaked upward, chased by cold draughts, finding exit through invisible veins above. The silence here is not only the hush of abandonment, it is the hush of a people who learned to bend stone to their will, to summon air through 60 vertical meters of stone, and to do so without blueprints or written record. And yet, for all the evidence, bone, soot, steel-grey grooves, a piercing uncertainty endures. It surfaces with every new chamber, every staircase corkscrewing down deeper and deeper, until direction itself dissolves. Whispers of Byzantine hymns rise up from the record. The place becomes a sanctuary for the persecuted, a labyrinth where prayers pressed against stone in uneasy hope. Pitch-black alcoves recall the urgency with which men, women, and children must have huddled, hearts pounding to the uneven rhythm of footsteps overhead. Derinkuyu's vastness unfolds in fits and starts, revealing not just isolated rooms, but a sprawling city beneath the earth. At a chamber junction, another twist emerges. Ancient passageways slither away into darkness, rumored to link to other, equally vast underworlds. Some archaeologists propose that a whole latticework of cities and tunnels snakes beneath these hills, an interlinked network stretching further than the eye or torchbeam can follow. Imagine, for a heartbeat, the weight of so many lives woven into such a warren. Markets, kitchens, stables, wine presses, entire generations breathing the rock's chill breath. Dust sifts down, fine as flour, coating the hush. In a far corner, an unfinished room stands testament to ambitions cut short, or threats that vanished as quickly as they came, a door without purpose. A chamber paused mid-birth. In the gloom, the possibility settles in. The greatest secret here may not be how Derinkuyu was dug, but why. And still, above ground, the plains of Cappadocia stretch quietly, shaped by time and wind into impossible stone valleys. The earth shields these depths completely, masking the truth that entire civilizations hid in plain sight, not on the horizon, but buried inside it. Here, boots leave no trace, and history is written only in chipped rock and the echo of chisels. Just as our eyes begin to adjust to Derinkuyu's dim hallways, a fresh question flickers, faint yet insistent. If so many lives depended on these depths, can we ever really know their builders? Are we standing in a monument to ingenuity or to fear? Cappadocia's earth may be hollowed by more than a single warren. Beneath the wind-carved plains of Cappadocia, something ancient slumbers out of sight. The sunlit world above, its rocky spires and sharp shadows, offers no hint of what lies below. Set your mind to stone and dust, to sudden cold as you step off the last stair and hear the hush swallow your presence. Venture deep, where the sharp ring of a chisel still echoes in the silence, and each exhalation stirs motes from the age-blackened walls. Here, beneath your feet, the ground conceals not a single secret, but a mesh of them. Archaeologists moved earth and memory to chart out Derinkuyu, the largest known subterranean city. The farther they mapped, the less the labyrinth made sense. Steep staircases coiled downward, their treads worn by untold feet, their angles tight and unnerving. Corridors ripple with the memory of generations, as if those who built them vanished only yesterday. Stone doors, round and massive, sit ready to be rolled shut against forgotten threat, each a silent barrier made for reasons no one now remembers. In some passages, the dust falls so thick you taste it with every breath. Shafts of lantern light barely pierce the gloom, tracing crude niches gouged in the walls to hold lamps, tools, or prayers. The air grows thinner with each descent, coloured by the smell of earth never warmed by sun. Veins of dampness trace the rock where water once filtered through, hinting at systems more complex than the simple shelters carved for survival. But Derinkuyu is not chaos. It's an edifice wrought from the patience of centuries, Multiple levels are staggered through volcanic tuff. Each curve, each narrow gallery, seems placed with a deliberate, almost obsessive logic. Some alleys allege secrecy, masking hidden rooms behind nondescript walls. Others waist deep in shadow, branch at odd angles, their ends lost to collapsed ceilings and the encroaching uncertainty of time. One glance at the map is enough to suggest something larger, the possibility that Derinkuyu does not stand alone. In Cappadocia, locals have long swapped stories of tunnels unearthed by ploughs or revealed beneath crumbled stone houses. Mysterious corridors, just tall enough for a stooping adult, thread for miles, then fade into blank rock or vanish beneath later villages. Some tunnels are less passage than migration, arteries draining from one buried sanctuary and surfacing at another, sometimes several kilometers apart. Rumors persist that a hand-drawn diagram hundreds of years old once marked a continuous line from Derinkuyu toward Kematli, another underground city sprawling beneath the soft hills. If that map still exists, it has yet to surface. Today, advanced surveys and midnight explorations have confirmed at least some real connections, a honeycomb binding at least two of Cappadocia's most elaborate refuges into something almost like a purposeful network. And every time a new tunnel is found, it breeds three more questions. If these communities once opened into each other, for whom was such an intricate defense intended? For what threat did they prepare in endless darkness? Step further into the warren and try not to lose your bearings. Underfoot, stone flakes crunch. The light from your torch stretches and climbs the arched ceilings, revealing low alcoves, each the size of a kneeling figure. In one cramped chamber, a niche marks the outline of an altar, blackened by centuries of breath and candle smoke. In a hush broken only by shifting dust, you find a chapel held tight by the rock, its walls etched with the traces of prayer and the lives once sheltered here. The air here is so still, you can almost imagine the slow, rhythmic cadence of ancient hymns, curling upward along the stone spirals. Elsewhere, in the city's deeper layers, rooms emerge that might once have been wells, food stores, or even classrooms. Their purposes are whispered rather than declared. Their shapes hint at life as it unfolded far from the sky. Connecting these levels are steep, twisting stairways, more winding than most visitors expect, and unforgiving to the legs. Their darkness is complete, the kind that seems to press in with real weight. At their base, sometimes, lies a ventilating shaft, a marvel in itself. Daylight shines down in rare, slender columns, making dust motes dance like embers suspended in time. Here comes the pattern interrupt, a twist impossible to ignore. Some modern explorers confide that even today, armed with maps and expert guides, it is easy to become lost. No GPS will rescue you in the underworld of Cappadocia. Only memory and instinct guide you back to the known. Some passageways lead abruptly to dead ends. Others burrow under the steps of villagers living ordinary lives, unaware of the immense hollowness below. Zoom out for a moment. Imagine one ancient town, then another, all linked by veins of limestone and darkness. Picture the effort. Thousands of tons of rock carved, removed, and hidden. Derinkuyu's true scale dwarfs anything above ground in this landscape. The city's size and sophistication have few peers in ancient Anatolia. Archaeological teams strained to grasp the immensity of what was achieved here, without iron, without industrial age dynamite, with only the unrelenting rhythm of wooden mallets and stone hammers reverberating through the centuries. Now, drift through the twisting arteries that ribbon away from Derinkuyu. At certain points, the tunnels double in width or angle, down in odd, calculated slants, hinting at adaptive thinking far beyond mere subsistence. The walls look freshly scored in places, their harsh grooves catching the lamp's beam. Maybe traces of hurried chiseling, maybe something more deliberate. Were new passages started as threats loomed, or did they serve rituals whose meaning has dissolved like so much smoke? Pause again. The eerie vastness is broken by an unexpected sound, the faint rattle of dust sliding from an alcove, the memory of unseen feet hurrying away. Down here, echoes take on almost human shape, each one a ghost of vanished multitudes. Somewhere, in a pocket of the labyrinth, an air shaft gently funnels a colder breath, signifying a yet unexplored branch. The feeling builds that even today's maps are incomplete, that the earth is holding back the heart of the mystery. Stories surface from people who grew up in Cappadocia and recall crawling into dark tunnels as children, always emerging somewhere strange, always trailing more mystery than certainty. Some say the earth is restless here, still shifting to hide what it once revealed. Others admit a kind of reverence, a hush reserved for those whose hands hollowed so much world beneath their own. As you near the edge of mapped tunnels, seeping daylight above promises a return to the known. Yet with every exit, a lingering sense presses in. This rocky plateau may be threaded with hallways no one has ever tread, and each newly found tunnel sketches the boundary of a network whose shape feels beyond imagination. Imagine what it would mean for history and for us if entire civilizations could vanish into the ground in silence, closing the doors behind them for good. And if this honeycombed Anatolian earth guards its own enigmas by the mile, what other stones are we only now struggling to understand? Elsewhere, in Lebanon's Baalbek, sublime platforms rest as mute siblings to Asia's quarries, art of a hidden order of giant stone blocks scattered across continents. The day breaks with a metallic chill in the hills above Nanjing, a faint mist swimming low to the ground and clinging to the stunted pines. Light spills in uneven bands across the gouged face of the Yangshan quarry, catching motes of ancient dust and crystals wedged in silent seams. The air here is thick with quiet and gravity, almost as though sound itself gets buffered by the immensity all around. In this valley's belly lies a riddle carved from mountains, massive stone blocks, left partly hacked from bedrock, dwarfing any onlooker. The scale presses down, both literal and psychic. Two laborers today, standing beside their tools, would seem like ants beside the long shadow of the main stele block. Even the ground beneath vibrates faintly with the memory of chisels, thousands working in unison centuries ago, their echoes drifting up into the pale sky. It is said that this unfinished giant would, if freed, outweigh even the famed monoliths at Baalbek, Lebanon. The Yangshan monument was never meant to stand alone. Around it, the quarry's face splays out with three immense stones abandoned in place, shaped so vast that their dimensions strain imagination more than any history book ever could. Each block rests tucked within a horseshoe of carved rock, distant from the city, and farther still from the resting place it was intended for. Even now, the chisel grooves remain sharp in spots, as if the workers might simply have gone home for supper and never returned. The largest, the main stele block, is often described as over 16 meters in length and soars higher than any fully grown elephant's shoulder. Its weight stands at an estimated 16,000 tons, a mass untouched, unmatched, unmovable. The plan, as much as anyone can reconstruct, was sublime in its audacity. During the Ming dynasty, an emperor's ambitions left these wounds in the mountains. The vision: extract, transport, and erect these stones as monumental markers for his mausoleum, sculpting a legacy in solid rock. But the scene today offers a different legacy, one of abandonment, of thresholds never crossed, of questions chiseling back at us across centuries. The first twist in this tale is buried in hindsight. Some historians believe that the builders, faced with growing dread, realized that a single snap in the moving process could compromise the entire memorial scheme. A misstep wouldn't just ruin the stone, but risk the integrity of the mausoleum design itself. The greater the ambition, the higher the cost of failure. And stone, unyielding, indifferent, so often outlasts the men who would master it. Sunlight, now higher, pokes through a ragged opening, touching the exposed corners of the unfinished steel. Dust motes twist lazily above shallow furrows, relics of hands and iron lost to time. The landscape itself seems to breathe, shifting ever so slightly, each blade of grass bending beneath the wind, heavy with memory. For all its stillness, the place hums with tactile details, a patient testament to the thousands who carved and levered, uncertain whether they could finish what they started. A pause, then a change in tempo. To grasp the strangeness of Yangshan, we trace a chain stretching far beyond China's borders. Many eyes have widened in awe at Lebanon's Baalbek, where the trilithon stones, larger than most houses, hold millennia of mystery in their silence. Yet here, in Yangshan, the scale is wilder still. The main stele block is significantly larger than Baalbek's biggest monolith. Each site seems to answer a mystery with a riddle, as if invisible architects played a game across continents, daring later generations to keep asking how and to what end. Answers here are few. There are only theories, drifting through history like clouds over these old hills. One idea is simple and brutal. The blocks were too heavy for human ingenuity, even with an army of laborers. Timber beams were stacked and wedged, but every movement risked splinter and collapse. With each attempted shift, the margin for disaster widened. To move such mass with wood, every timber had to be replaced in a constant, nerve-bending cycle. Each replacement another roll of fate's dice. In the end, physics refused all bargains, and ambition found an immovable wall. Step closer to the base of the stele, where dust still sifts from seams of weathered stone. Knee-high weeds curl into niches left by chisels. It's not just the weight, the logistics of hauling blocks hundreds of meters, then many kilometers to the tomb site, drift toward the impossible. The roads would have needed to bear extraordinary loads, the labor, unending and perilous. For a moment, Picture the world as it was. The Ming Court burned with urgency. New projects began, perhaps before the old ones closed. As resources ebbed into other imperial ventures, the labor force at Yangshan abandoned their posts, maybe one by one, maybe all at once in some unrecorded moment. By the end, the quarry lay still, its titans unchained but never freed. This is where the story changes again, zooming out and inviting us to see the global pattern. The unfinished stones of Yangshan and the mute platforms at Baalbek are like distant cousins, bound by some unwritten law of scale and ambition. From Asia's green valleys to Lebanon's ochre plains, these megalithic enigmas form a silent brotherhood. Here, there's a shared pulse, the echoes of ancient tools clanging, the perpetual hush settling in after centuries, the wind swirling through half-carved halls. Every block, every quarry, is a fossilized wager against time. A shaft of light pierces the quarry's lip, blinding for a second. Unfinished shadow gives way to sudden brilliance. As your eyes adjust, you notice new details. The mineral gleam on freshly rain-washed slopes, chip marks eroded to the gentleness of old driftwood. All the energy poured into these stones endures mainly as texture, a story told in grain, weight, silence. Was Yangshan a fever dream of engineering hubris, or a testament to the limits of imagination and muscle? Even now, researchers puzzle over each tool mark. Was there some half-remembered method, lost in the dust of dynasties, for hauling giants across landscape? Or did ambition always exceed ability? Along the margins of these questions, the story lingers. The stone waits, immense and unmoved. Yet, the air is never quite still here. Dust lifts and settles, as if the quarry itself is whispering, reminders that we have only begun to scratch the surface of ancient ingenuity. Walking among these unfinished monoliths and hollowed cities, the mind reels at what was achieved and at what was forgotten. In the dry hush just before dawn, thick shadows press close against monumental shapes rising raw from the earth. Here among China's hills, the edges of stone look impossibly crisp, sharpened not by time but recent intervention, as if ancient hands have withdrawn only moments before. A coldness clings to the shallow steps, gouged deep in the bedrock, and the silence vibrates with the memory of violence, the hard, rhythmic fall of chisels echoing back and forth in the quarry's throat. Dust drifts in stagnant curtains, settling into seams nobody fully understands. This is the Yangshan Quarry, set on the outskirts of Nanjing, in Jiangsu province. Its own unfinished work conceals a story every bit as awe-inspiring as the monuments that did survive to completion. The terrain here undulates gently, grass and hardy shrubs clinging between splinters of exposed grey. Yet at the quarry's heart lies a secret on a scale, and with a stubbornness that mocks human ambition. The colossal stele base, cleaved from the very mountain hundreds of years ago, but never moved. Its purpose never realized. Instead, it remains imprisoned in stone, one piece among several, still fused to the slope from which it was shorn. If you run your hand along this monolith's surface, you feel its paradox. Precise lines sheared by forgotten tools, the sheer magnitude of work rendered almost meaningless by its sudden abandonment. The air hangs with an expectancy that never resolves. the purpose only half told. The project was halted, historians say, when engineers realized the stone's immensity, on the order of tens of thousands of tons, would have resisted even an empire's ingenuity. A structure so massive, it could never have been transported with the technology of the time. Imagine the speculation. What secret techniques did stonemasons believe they had discovered to justify even attempting this impossible feat? The answer is lost. Sunlight slides across battered tool marks, briefly illuminating not just rock, but the trembling edges of a dream scaled up to mythic proportions. All around, carved trenches and half-finished blocks form a puzzle of intention. Huge, orderly, abandoned, as if by some urgent, silent command. Each groove seems less like a mistake than the unfinished line of a script, the meaning just out of reach. The only sure thing is the echo of ambition it leaves behind. One must wonder how many other grand visions were etched out, only to vanish alongside the skills required to complete them. A breeze stirs loose stones near your feet, dragging you away from Yangshan's gaping wounds and bearing your mind far to the west, beneath the Anatolian earth, through a darkness untouched by sun for millennia. There, in the heart of central Turkey, an altogether different monument broods just below the thinning topsoil. The descent into Derinkuyu begins with a cracked slab of volcanic tuff, an opening ringed in old soot and sharp with the scent of mineral dampness. As your eyes adjust, you take the first step down a staircase that plunges into silence, swallowing daylight behind you. The walls close in. Each footfall is dampened by soil and ancient dust, the air growing heavier with every level. At first, you might notice niches carved precisely for lamps, evidence of a people for whom this underworld was almost home. Then, chambers expand around you. Low, domed ceilings, smooth pillars vanishing into the gloom, ghostly traces of markets, stables, schools, sanctuaries tucked deep within rock. Passages twist through the darkness, engineered at impossible angles, descending further and further until you lose count of both levels and time. It's easy to imagine a pulse down here, the distant sound of hundreds breathing quietly in the dark. Archeologists debate the origins of this labyrinth. Some claim the city predates even the Phrygians, perhaps first carved by the Hittites 1,000 years earlier, their skills and fears both swallowed by the earth. Theories abound, refuge from war, from climate, from cosmic anxieties. What is certain is the scale. Derinkuyu burrows down many stories, enough to shelter thousands for weeks on end. Its doors roll into place, as large as millstones, engineered to be sealed from inside. In every narrow hallway, you taste the whisper of urgency, of entire generations trained for flight below ground. Halfway down, a corridor splits abruptly, one shaft blocked, another curving further on, as though designed for confusion. Ancient masons could have intended this not only for protection, but to mislead unwelcome guests. Local legends hint at tunnels running for miles, connecting neighboring underground cities in a hidden web. Careful feet have mapped several, but experts warn far more likely remain undiscovered, lost to collapse and silence. Is it possible whole networks of peoples lived and moved out of sight, their stories intact but unread? Occasionally, your light flickers across a forgotten detail, a scratched symbol, a shallow well. the remnants of a ventilation shaft engineered with genius. Cool air cycles gently, defying the cloying closeness around you. Then, as quickly as you arrived, the silence tightens once more. You sense that these artificial caverns were not simple refuges, but sites of ritual, spaces haunted both by history and by dreams of safety now unreachable. Above ground, thousands of miles beyond Anatolia, great streaks of shadow lie across the stone skeletons of other megastructures. Unfinished, weathered, repurposed by centuries of wind and scavengers, these monuments nevertheless possess a strange magnetic pull, evidence of lifetimes spent wresting meaning from the mineral realm. Every continent holds hidden scars from enterprises too great, too mysterious to be complete. Long-forgotten names and lost ambitions are pressed into every lintel and column, encrypted not in words, but in intractable mass. In the empty heart of these places, the sound of a chisel rings now only in imagination. Dust hangs motionless, drifting slowly through angled shafts of light that pierce a collapsed roof or a narrow breach in a massive wall. The palimpsest of human striving, visible in every wound and boundary, reminds us that the mastery of stone was once a matter of life, belief, and immortality. These masterpieces and failures cloud our understanding of what humanity could achieve, raising questions about the reach of ancient minds that modern technology cannot easily answer. As you retrace your way up from the deep tunnels of Derinkuyu, blinking against the return of light, the atmosphere above feels thinner. Echoes from these places follow, carried on the wind, a chorus of unfinished ambitions, each more daunting than the last. The threshold of knowledge stands as heavy as the stone itself, daring us yet again to interpret what cannot be forgotten, though it can never be fully known. Across China, in Turkey, and across the world, monoliths and sunken metropolises wait, holding their breaths beneath the weight of centuries. The morning sun creeps once more across weathered stone, promising only that the secrets carved into earth and bedrock, secrets both accidental and deliberate, are never truly silent. The first rays of the morning catch on a battered crest of limestone, igniting the ruins in a momentary glow. Wisps of chill fog, rising from the low earth, wrap silent monoliths in shrouds of silver. The ancient world wakes, not with a roar, but in the hush of anticipation. Yangshan's colossal stone blocks looming beneath a sky once crowded with the sounds of chisels, scaffolds, and human ambition. Dew gathers in the old tool marks, each droplet magnifying the stubborn lines scored by vanished hands. 6 centuries have passed, yet the quarry floor remains frozen in its unfinished labor. The largest stone, rough-hewn and unmoved, slumbers where vision and possibility fell out of step. A behemoth estimated to weigh around 16,000 tons, a figure that staggers the mind even when spoken aloud today. Standing in its shadow, the scale erases any notion of ordinary hardship. The marks left in the stone look like calligraphy left by giants. Each groove resonates with the echo of intent, each shattered edge with the uncertainty that halted the work. Beneath the surface layer, time itself seems to thicken. Dust, disturbed by a bird or the faintest breeze, swirls in slow columns that catch the golden dawn. Ming dynasty plans, now lost to our era, may have once filled this air with the rhythm of hammers and hope. But as the centuries stacked up, so did the silent question: what forced the workers to leave these stones forever earthbound. Shift east, and darkness folds around ascending stairways and tight stone corridors. Derinkuyu emerges not into the daylight, but plunges deep below the parched ochre of Cappadocia. In the hushed stillness, the only sound is your footsteps echoing off volcanic tuff. Then a sudden flutter, the invisible wings of a startled bat, breaking the cavern's silence. The passage twists. The dry, cool air grows heavier as you descend level after level, past doors hewn from solid stone, past passages just wide enough for a person to squeeze through sideways. Entire rooms open up, storage pits, kitchens, stables, water wells protected by hidden vents. Here, space is measured not in square footage, but in the ability to vanish from sight, to escape whatever threat once drove whole communities beneath the ground. In places, the chambers feel closer to scars or memories than to architecture. You begin to sense the vastness. Derinkuyu's spread plunges across multiple levels, honeycombs carved with the persistence of centuries. Some corridors spiral downward for what feels like forever. At the lowest point, the darkness grows absolute. 60 meters below the sunlit world, that's nearly 200 feet of earth overhead. A sense of breathless awe settles in. But unraveling the origins of these places never yields ease or clarity. In Turkey, a twist of fate. It was 1963 when a man, tearing down a stone wall in his own modest home, battered through the bricks and revealed a narrow doorway. Beyond it, the black throat of a passage descended deeper than any wine cellar or forgotten cistern, and then opened into the astounding immensity of Derinkuyu, an underground city, lost beneath ordinary life, waiting in the patient dark to be found once more. The world is littered with such moments, those accidental encounters where ancient ambition collides with modern routine. A mason in China looks up at the unmovable shadow of Yangshan's blocks, too massive for even the boldest imagination to budge. A homeowner in Turkey stumbles, quite literally, into a silence that stretches thousands of years deep. In the quiet after the initial shock, both men find themselves staring down a question older than memory. Who could have done this, and why? Step back to the quarry, where a single shaft of sunlight now paints the gouged stone in stark relief. The unfinished blocks at Yangshan have remained rooted in place for more than 600 years, longer than many nations have existed, longer than entire languages have thrived and gone silent. The stones do not offer answers, nor does the stuffy air clinging to Derinkuyu's stairwells. Instead, each site presses a silent challenge into the hands of those who visit. Measure yourself, if you can, against the weight of what has been left behind. Dust rises, swirling lazily in a slow wind that barely stirs the silvered grass at Yangshan's rim. Echoes linger, of rough voices calling orders, of stone massive enough to flatten belief in a single glance. Nearby, a sliver of broken tool, swallowed by the quarry's soil, gleams in the sun for just a moment before the shadow returns. Was it dropped in fatigue, or set down anticipating lunch? The worker expecting to return and never imagining that history would pause right there, freezing the tool and task in its stride. It is the tension between silence and effort, between the known and the unknowable, that gives these sites their gravity. Here, the impossible is anchored not by myth, but by stone. by evidence too massive to be dismissed, and yet so far outside normal experience that our minds stall at the threshold. The walls of Derinkuyu, damp and pockmarked, still hold hints of smoke and the sweet tang of ancient wine, though no eye has watched a fire flicker in these chambers for generations. In the natural lightless bloom, even oxygen seems to hang heavy and thick, as if remembering all those restless hearts once sheltered far below the reach of the sun. To stand in these spaces is to be pressed by their questions, not simply how they were built, but what drove people to imagine and begin them at all. It is to feel that uncanny urge to reach, to carve, to hide, to endure, that must have pulsed in countless generations. Our tools have changed, but the echo of yearning has not. And so, across centuries and continents, the world's great unsolved structures do not fade. Instead, they gather stillness as naturally as stone gathers dust. The scars at Yangshan, the forgotten stairwells of Derinkuyu, each site endures, not as evidence of failure, but as a testament to the audacity of ancient ambition and the sheer scale of the mysteries we inherit. When the sun sets and the last echo dies away, one simple fact lingers. For every monument finished, for every marvel we understand, there remain these silent megastructures, their weight, their darkness, and their patient challenge standing unchanged. These places remind us, ultimately, that the deepest mysteries are not always buried in legend, but chiseled into the earth itself, waiting out the centuries until someone is ready to look, really look, and accept that some questions may never yield to certainty.